Aloha, I'm Elena Hugh. Welcome to another edition of PTC TV, brought to you by PTC'15 Platinum sponsor, Equinix. Now this is the fourth of 5 programs specially created for PTC'15, and the last that will air in-room on Channel 9. If you missed any of the previous programs or want to see the 5th program, you can watch them online after the conference. Go to ptc.org.
Aloha! I hope you have enjoyed the conference so far and that you have found the experience to be a valuable way to start your new year. We still have a series of very interesting keynotes and topical sessions today, and more opportunity to gain new insights for the year ahead. You are also invited to the PTC'15 closing lunch and award ceremony. I look forward to seeing you there.
Hi, I'm Adam Janota from Equinix. We see an evolution happening right now. Revenues of the world's top 100 networks will grow less than 2% over the next few years. Traffic routed through data centers will grow at 23%. That is triple the volume. Does your strategy leverage the world's key data centers where clouds and customers connect? Savvy network providers are evolving their service offerings in order to grow their revenue streams. Expanding capacity, automating their network infrastructure, adding cloud services, leveraging cloud exchange, and building hybrid clouds. Talk to us. We can help you connect to the cloud and accelerate your growth.
Aloha, I'm here with Jim Poole from Equinix, and we're going to talk a little bit about the cloud and some things that are new with your company. So tell us what's new and exciting.
Well, today what we're talking a lot about with our customers tends to be the tendency in the industry to need to connect private networks to cloud resources. Up until this point, the natural habit of people has been to reach the cloud over the internet, and what we're seeing is a demand for private networking assets to be able to connect to cloud resources, and most of that happens in buildings like the ones that Equinix runs.
Why is there a benefit to do that?
The benefit generally comes from the fact that the internet is a very variable performance kind of a platform. You don't get SLAs, you can't really predict the behavior or the performance of an individual application, and private networking gives the advantage of speed and security that you don't get on the internet.
Is security a main concern from your clients?
Security is a huge concern for people. We're talking about essentially the crown jewels of most companies is what sits on top of their private networks, and they want that to be as secure as possible.
So what is it that you guys do that's different from the other guys?
Well, we do several things. One is that because we run many of the peering points in the country, we have a lot of the networks that sit in our centers. And what we do is we run a couple of different things. One is we allow for direct cross connects to exist between the cloud platform and the networking company. We also run what we call the Equinix Cloud Exchange, which is essentially a managed platform that allows many-to-many interconnectivity between many clouds and many networks.
What's new with the cloud, or what can you look forward to in the next couple of years?
Well, this tendency toward private networking is what is, I think, on top of mind of most people. Most of the analysts that we speak to, most of the networking companies and cloud companies that we see this as sort of the future of what they're doing. So we've recently announced deals with Google, Microsoft, and Amazon to make this capability available in markets all around the world. We currently do this in 17, moving to 19, and then probably into the mid-20s going into 2015.
Is there anything else that you're doing besides cloud that people are taking an interest in?
Oh, sure. I mean, our traditional business is really about digital ecosystems, and so although networking to cloud is currently very, very popular, we continue to be the lead company connecting networks with other networks, as well as networks with large content. And in that particular space, what we see is a huge increase in traffic coming off of, for instance, mobile networks to reach content. Right now, everybody's reaching content from tablets and cell phones. That is creating a huge increase in demand for interconnection services between mobile companies and both applications and content available in our data centers.
So is there a big difference between mobile connections and PC connections as you see the growth of the mobile community grow?
Actually, it's a great question. The biggest difference that we see is that because the internet has been such a mainstay of wireline networks, their networks are really optimized to interconnect between content resources and homes. In the mobile networking case, that's not necessarily the case. Many mobile networks were really optimized for voice, and so things like packet cores tend to sit inside of private facilities that are not well interconnected, and that's really what's driving demand for our services.
Where can people get more information?
You can go to www.equinix.com and learn everything you need to know.
All right, Jim Poole from Equinix, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Would you like a quick and easy way to keep track of the conference program and schedule? Download the PTC mobile app and favorite the sessions you'd like to attend. Learn more about PTC'15 sponsors and find out where meeting suites are located. You can do all this and more. Search for PTC'15 in the App Store or in Google Play. PTC'15 is made possible in part by the generosity of the PTC'15 sponsors. Mahalo to the PTC Diamond sponsor, Tata Communications. Thank you for all of your support. Let's join William Barney, Stephen Smith, and John Young for the CEO keynote panel.
Please welcome to the stage Mr. William Barney.
All right, today we're going to talk about the cloud and what we call as driving transformation. Most of you that know me, I always go back to the guy that started it all, Mr. Steve Jobs, probably one of the great thinkers in terms of the cloud. Anyone that uses iTunes or is an Apple user realizes that you're a massive user of the cloud. And I think he was thinking about this in 1995 and sort of brought about a revolution that's probably will be even greater than the iPhone and the iPad over the next couple of years when we start to think about what he's achieved in terms of what's happened with the cloud. What I'm going to do today is just set the stage, talk about whether we're in an evolution or a transformation. Some of my colleagues will argue one side, I'll argue the other side. We'll talk about the shifting landscape of cloud adoption, and then how do we navigate through this new world. And then we'll open it up for our CEO panel. One of the things that I think about when we think about cloud is we're going through a period where the internet is essentially transforming from what we used to be a content delivery mechanism to an industrial capability. And if you think about it today, what is cloud? Cloud is essentially using the internet to produce things. And most of us that have been internet users and internet players over the last couple of years, we always thought about it as content. It's no longer about content. And when we start to look at the trends with big data, 70 to 80% of what goes over the internet won't be content in the future. It'll actually be driven by cloud computing. What does this mean to the actual CIOs? And in my job, I spend a lot of time with CIOs. And 10 years ago, their biggest focus was data centers. They were all looking at hardware. They tried to figure out how they could build networks around the world and connect large infrastructure. If you look at it now, most CIOs are trying to figure out how to get out of the infrastructure business. They're trying to figure out how they can rent infrastructure and not necessarily own infrastructure, which completely changes the way that they look at how they build their networks, but also how they actually spend capital. So if you look at capital budgets, they're very, very different. Most banks today are now thinking of at least 10 to 15% of their networks and their compute will actually be in the cloud, and some believe it'll be as much as 50%. What does this mean for us? If you're a telecom operator or if you're a data center operator, you've essentially moved into a new world. If you look at this little circle up here, most of the guys in this conference, of the 5,000 people, sort of play in this wide area, big data or voice side, what I would call the telecom industry. There's a few guys like Steve Smith that play down here on the data center space, and then most of the OTT guys are sort of over here. But the reality is these two markets are fairly small. Reality is we now can play in a much bigger game. And if you're a telecom operator, you're moving into a space that you can operate in, which is a market that's almost 7 times the size of where we were. That's the good news. The challenging news is those guys from that market over there are also coming into our market. So while the transformation's going in one direction, you're also going to have guys that used to be in the computing industry now playing in the network business. And so these are going to be some of the challenges that we'll see over the next few years. What does this mean? If you look at the data center largely was a mainframe environment many years ago. It's moved towards server farms, and we believe over the next couple of years, and Steve will spend some time talking about this, we're going to go to a much more of a virtualized server environment. What does this mean? Just some specific numbers that if you look at today, 15 of the top 100 companies today has the same market value as the top 100 telcos. So if you looked at 1995, we were all the most valuable companies in the world. If you look at the OTT companies now, they're the most valuable companies in the world. So we've gone down, they've gone way up. That's one of the things that happened. They're also sitting on a ton of cash. All the OTT players are sitting on $100 billion plus of cash today. And they're continuing to add cash. If you look at the iTunes capability, they got 800 million users right now. It just throws off cash. It's a cash generating machine. And just to put it in perspective of the advertising today, these guys control, just between Facebook and Google, they control 70% of the market. So if you looking back, flashback 20 years, we've essentially seen a huge change from where we were to where we are today. How do you win in this new world? A couple things we'll talk about today. One, you focus on big data has to go on big fiber. You also look at how you actually build your data centers. I think we're going to see a different type of data center model going forward, a much more distributed platform as opposed to large data centers in single locations. We'll see much more of a distributed platform. And then finally, the most important thing that everyone talks about is cloud orchestration. With that, I'll hand it over to my distinguished group of panelists, and we'll have a pretty interesting chat. So I'll invite my team out here onto the stage.
Please welcome to the stage Robert Morse, Stephen Smith, and John Young.
Good morning. I'm very excited to be here moderating the CEO keynote this year. We have a terrific group of panelists. I think you're really going to enjoy what I think is a very rich topic, which is the cloud and the way it's changing the way we do business. Let me introduce the panelists briefly, and then we'll dive right into the discussion. Bill Barney, as you know, is CEO of Global Cloud Exchange. Global Cloud Exchange has one of the largest fiber carriers in the world, with particular strength in Asia and the emerging markets. Bill has also been a visionary in this space, launching the CloudX platform in October last year, and as you heard in his remarks, thinking about where the cloud is going in terms of carrier perspectives. Steve Smith is CEO of Equinix, with over 100 data centers in 30-plus markets in 15 countries, if I've got that right. Equinix has a truly global perspective on customer demand. Steve has also been a thought leader in the industry, launching the Equinix Cloud Exchange, and including this morning announcing a new acquisition that's going to help them with their cloud strategy. It was nice of you to provide us some new content for the panel this morning, hot off the press. And no panel is complete without a hot startup. John Young is the founder and CEO of Aptera. Let's see, could we go back 2 slides? There we go. Maybe someone can help us.
Should come up down there.
All right. Bill's next to last slide talked about cloud orchestration, and John's company is a great example of cloud orchestration. He's got a number of large carriers as clients, and so here you have on the panel this morning a perspective coming from the fiber world, from the data center world, and from the software world, but all approaching this problem from their own particular backgrounds. So without any more ado, let's jump into it. I might start, Steve, in your keynote here last year, you talked about the cloud as a major paradigm shift. A year has gone by. How fast is it happening?
Well, it's good morning to everybody, and thanks for having us today. I would describe it as shifting at a faster rate than we probably could have predicted a year or 2 years ago, as Bill alluded to in his opening comments. We, from our perspective at Equinix, our role, as most of you know in this room, is to get in the middle of it and help accelerate the commercial development of big trends like cloud. And it's not the only trend, as Bill said, that's spinning out there fast. And I think if you look back 35 years to the development of the PC, I've not seen a time where there's so many trends with mobile and social and cloud and the other big data and Internet of Things that are accelerating and spinning at the same time at a rate that's causing the world to change faster than most companies are really realizing. So, but with particular to cloud, we have definitely seen the cloud unfold in our data centers all over the world in the biggest markets in the world, and it's the biggest public cloud players putting access nodes and service nodes all around the world, not just with Equinix, but with many data center providers. And so we see a world of where historically the network service providers that have enabled Equinix to do what we've done for a while now are being paired up with cloud service providers. And so the service provider world today, from our view, includes both cloud service providers and network service providers, and the growth on the cloud side is enormous. But the networks are there in the middle of it, and they're facilitating, and it's a multi-cloud environment.
It's a very exciting time. As we talk to enterprises, though, and as you look at compute today, the vast majority of it is still sitting in-house at corporations themselves. And while people have a desire to move it into the cloud, it's not always as easy as we think. John, you want to talk a little bit about your perspective on some of the barriers to adoption?
Sure. No, I think it would be interesting to look at from the perspective of an end user, the enterprise, right? I see that there's a major shift between buying patterns and also who's taking control in those buying decisions in the last 5 years, right? 5 years ago, when you look at IT, it's mostly set up to have an application group and infrastructure group. The application group, if they want to spin up a server to deploy application, they need to apply and get approval and so on, right? But the changes from our engagement in the last year has shifted to the application group is taking a lot more control, right, in terms of deploying, because it's so easy now, so that the focus is mostly on the application that focus on driving return on value.
I think this all sounds good in theory, but talk about a couple of examples, like actual problems that your customers are solving, or the applications they're using as these initial sort of cases for the cloud. We got to make this, I don't know.
Well, I think like a lot of the enterprise, whether it's pharmaceutical or any vertical industry areas, right, that for those enterprise to set up like the infrastructure, even in the cloud, that you can buy compute capacity on demand, that setting up the software and able to run jobs for a short period, like hours or days, and then collect the results, and then you no longer need the application anymore. Like being able to orchestrate applications to set up and tear down in a fast manner really help them to drive efficiency, right? Cloud solve probably 50% of the problem, so you can launch server really fast, but ultimately what you need to do is to run apps.
Other cases or examples that you think people should have in mind as they think about the early cases?
Yeah.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was going to just add on what John's saying. I think when we look at enterprises, and at Equinix, we've accumulated roughly 1,000 enterprises over 15 years. And just to put that into perspective, and as everybody in this room knows, we're all pursuing the enterprise. Everybody's going after all these industry verticals that we call the enterprise to help service them and administer them and help them get to the cloud and other compute and application services. We've accumulated about 1,000 enterprises as customers in 15 years. There's another 340 to 350,000 companies out there today called enterprises that are over 10 million in sales, US dollars sales, and have at least 500 people in the company, which arguably would be a prospect for anybody in this room. So there's plenty of market out there to go service. And so I don't think any of us would argue that everybody in this room is running their companies to try to service the enterprise and help them for certain parts of their application workload to go to the cloud for performance reasons, security reasons, network congestion reasons, et cetera. And so we see lots of examples of customers moving portions of their application workload to this environment. And today what we're creating inside of our data centers is the public environment, obviously, with all the network service providers, and in many cases a private environment with directly to the cloud service provider so that you have choice. And if you're a CIO and you're managing 1,000 applications and you decide to put certain portion of that workload into an environment to get access to the cloud providers, you can do it privately or publicly. And that's the multi-cloud environment we're seeing unfold in these data centers. And it's driven by the big players. You know, the big three, no question about it, AWS, Microsoft Azure, and Google, and very closely behind IBM SoftLayer and Oracle and SAP and VMware and Cisco. They're all running to do the same thing from what we see in our centers, to put access nodes out there so that when enterprises put distributed workload around the world, they can see them and directly connect into them in an as-a-service model for certain parts of the workload.
How is that playing out in some of the emerging markets where you have a large customer base?
Yeah, I think that's probably going to be the challenge for the next couple of years, which is, you know, the broadband capabilities. I mean, cloud is so we have customers in Western Europe and the United States, and I think the adoption is extremely rapid. I think the challenge is when you talk to an Indian CIO or a Middle Eastern CIO, it's a little bit slower, and I think part of that is just because of the access speeds are slower. You don't have as much wireless capability around, so you can't actually leave the premises as easily as you can in the United States. And also just the sophistication of the apps right now are somewhat behind. But so I think in the emerging markets it's different. But I think cloud plays a different role in the emerging markets because I think it actually is a much bigger consumer play. And I think one of the things that we're going to see, I think, in the emerging markets is that consumers will be able to get on with cloud services for $100 a terminal. They'll be actually able to access the internet. And so when you think about digital divide and that 2 billion people, we will see that the consumer will be the beneficiary of cloud, I think, in places like India and Western China and places where there's low-income individuals. So I think it will impact the emerging markets, but probably not as much in the enterprise space. Sorry for the long answer.
No, that's great. Look, the desire for people to tap directly into the big three and other cloud computing networks is clearly a rising trend. And I think if we had one more seat on the panel, it would be someone for the OTT perspective. Yeah. Talk a little bit about how the rise of the OTT players and those big cloud compute providers is affecting your business. Partners, competitors, what's that relationship like?
Let me start. Well, it's multidimensional, and I think as most people know in this room, you know, most of the network service providers have some data center capacity. They've got application offerings, they've got network offerings, service offerings, et cetera. So I think in the world we live in today, we're going to compete a little bit around the edges. We're going to partner with each other. You know, from our perspective, we've been pretty much in the 15 and a half years that we've been around a direct face-to-face with our customers. And as you saw, if you saw the announcement this morning, the world is changing at such a rapid pace that we are starting to also develop an indirect capability. So we're developing a channel capability at Equinix for the first time in 15 and a half years. And also we're developing a professional services capability. We have learned over the last 18 months as we have these cloud conversations that our customers are saying, I get the architectural perspective. I see what your 100 data centers can do for me. I want to put stuff in Asia, Europe, in a distributed fashion in Americas. Do you have some people that can help me build the plan? Right. I need a 30, 60, 90-day assessment to help me build the plan. I may use Equinix at the end of the day, but I may not. But do you have people that can help me? Because I buy into what you're talking to us about. So we've made the decision to, and we announced this morning, a pretty small firm, roughly 30 employees, that is fronting AWS and Microsoft today with helping companies blueprint to get to the cloud. Yep. And so we've decided to move in that direction, have that capability in-house, partnered with our channel and our direct sales force to go facilitate people getting to the multi-cloud environment.
Totally.
Well,
your question, OTT competitors or threats, I think they're, the reality is if you look at the successful OTT players, they've figured out how to actually make money on the internet. So the first group of guys that came through didn't necessarily make a lot of money. These guys have actually figured out how to monetize it and have done it extremely well. I actually think there'll be more players like this. So we think of it the big three. My guess is there'll be a big 10 or a big 15. The great thing about cloud computing is it levels the playing field for many small startups to accelerate into this. And I think we'll see that there'll be a lot more little companies getting big fast. And I think that's one of the things that we've seen. He's in Silicon Valley all the time. But the reality is we see startups go from 0 to 1 million users or 10 million users or 20 million users in a matter of months, where it used to take years to get there. And I think that's going to be the big difference. So Google has got a good start, but I think there'll be guys catching up soon. And I think it's going to be an interesting time.
Well, I can give you a good data point to support that, just from the perspective we have. We have almost 5,000 customers at Equinix around the world in that time we've been in business. And roughly 1,000 network service providers as customers. And everybody in this room knows what we do for them. Just in the last 2 years, we've accumulated almost 1,200 cloud and IT service provider type customers. So customers that used to be managed services providers that now call themselves cloud hosting companies, et cetera. But just think about that. In 15 years, we accumulated 1,000 networks as customers, enabling them to sell services in our facilities. In the last 2 years, 1,200 plus, and we categorize them with IT service providers and pure play cloud providers. We probably have close to 500 pure play cloud providers that are exactly what Bill just described. Small companies, medium-sized companies, some will make it, some won't make it. So there'll be some consolidation. But if you just get your head around that, to think how many people have come out of nowhere to get into this business, it gives you the order of magnitude of what's going on and how fast it's going on.
Yeah, I'll offer one other statistic in here for people. In the U.S., capital spending on IT is now $1 in every 4 of CapEx is spent by the private sector. So $600 billion a year, still majority spent by people doing it themselves. So the size of this spend as it begins to move out and into the data centers and onto the fiber networks is just an enormous amount, of spend. It means a lot more traffic too. We saw the 8K TV yesterday. We hear about a lot of this. You've talked a little bit about a golden age of fiber.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit more about how you see that coming to play, and is the cloud helping that or not?
Well, I mean, we didn't get a chance to, I was rushing through my slides there, but I think we're both originally computer guys. He's an EDS guy, and I was a sort of a Unix guy many, many years ago. And I think the interesting thing is we sit between the terminal. The end user now uses terminals. Everything, if you look at everyone in this room, they're probably using some form of terminal, and the computer somewhere else. And what connects that? It's either high-speed wireless or glass, and we sit between. So that's when I say it's the golden age of fiber. We become the bus inside a computer, and I think we will be for quite a while, which I think is a huge opportunity for fiber operators. I think it'll mean that there'll be a lot more building, there'll be a lot more focus there, and I think there'll be a lot more focus on wireless as well. So I think LTE and a lot of these technologies will get a lot more focus over the next couple of years, because they're going to have to. They're going to become, it's no longer, does this data, maybe is it important to me? Did I get my news? It's now, I can't actually run my application to go to work because it's I'm running over this network. So it becomes a much different network experience, I think, going forward.
Well, I think we've given a good landscape of where we are today and some of the dynamics, but I know people want to hear us look into the crystal ball a little bit as we look down the road. So you opened with the Steve Jobs quote. He also talked a lot about not just developing what his customers were asking for, but developing products that the customers didn't know they want yet. As you think about products and services that you're looking to roll out over time, are you doing this, to what extent are you doing it in response to things you're hearing from your customers? And to what extent are you thinking about, we've got a lead here with things that people may not know, that they want?
What? Should I?
Sure, please.
I think the buying pattern will continue to change from the enterprise side. Now, we're seeing that in the next 3 to 5 years, enterprise will not be buying data center space, network, and all those to build their own cloud and lay software on top of it. But they're more like they want to buy application to support how many users. And those applications can be distributed across multiple geography, which make the network very important, right? So the buying going to be more on application by application base, and And the only difference, I think, is going to be whether the application is shared like SaaS or is dedicated to one customer.
I think the way we look at the future is driven by customers that really probably can't look any further than 12 to 18, maybe 24 months out and see what their customers are telling them and where they see the world going. Yep. So we spend a lot of time dealing with our partners and customers in this room thinking about where the world is evolving to. And it's changing in a lot of ways. I mean, half of our workforce today are millennials, right? They're people in that age group. So the user and the people we're dealing with today is certainly shifting away from our time frame.
Yeah.
And it's shifting fast, and it's social, and it's mobile, and it's cloud-based, and it's got a lot of big data. And so I think the combination of all those, we see the requirements from everybody we talk to having to think about those. Most CIOs today are having to solve for all of those initiatives with how they're deploying their infrastructure. And I think Bill said in the beginning is absolutely true, is the world has changed from, you can't run today a Global 2000 company with a centralized infrastructure. Those days are gone. Your employees are distributed around the world, your revenue is distributed around the world, your customers are distributed around the world. And I think we're going to continue to benefit, all of us, from the fact that if you have capacity and you have application capability and you have network capability distributed around the planet, you're going to be able to catch business all over, and people are going to win in that environment.
Tell me a little bit, as you look ahead and thinking about where to go with the new services and products.
Well, I think we're more thinking about infrastructure. I think as we get into the new world, I think we're going to chase power. I think we're going to chase, as we start thinking about infrastructure, I think, countries that have 3 cents a kilowatt versus a country that's got 20 cents a kilowatt. When you have a network, you can start to move computing in different directions. So as a carrier in that, that wholesale space, I think it's going to change how we build networks. And we think there's going to be a lot more focus on the developing markets versus the developed. And those are going to be the harder places to actually go, and that's where enterprises are going to struggle the most, we believe. So, because they're going to be chasing consumers. Most of the consumers are in the emerging markets, and the infrastructure is way behind. And so cloud actually enables a lot of those opportunities to happen. I think that's where, from our perspective, obviously we're going to compete in the United States and Europe, but also a special emphasis for us will be on how do we actually get into those emerging markets.
Bob, another thought around that topic is I think the theme at Davos a year ago was hyperconnectivity. And I firmly believe that as we think about going forward, that because of the choice out there in this multi-cloud, hybrid cloud environment that we're all talking about, that we see unfolding around the world, that the hyperconnectivity required to run your companies today is a theme that's not going to go away. I mean, interconnection, or whatever you want to call it, people connecting to each other to run their businesses is not going away, and it's accelerating. And we can see it every day in our business, and I'm sure Bill sees it every day. And a great thing about being in the business that we're all in together, we're in the heart of that. We all, whether you're a data center provider, or a network provider, or an application provider, it's all going to get interconnected in some form or fashion. And the people that are thinking ahead of that in the next generation of interconnection are the people that are going to really position to win.
One of the themes that I've heard on the tip of the tongue with people is talking about security and the extent to which either real or perceived fears there are causing people to sort of drive with one foot on the brake and one on the gas as they go through this shift. A lot of that is application security or data security, but how big a role does that play in your businesses and what you're talking to your customers about?
Well, I think security is absolutely, we look at Snowden, it was a spectacular, situation, but I think, the reality is no one wants anyone reading their stuff, right? And so it's an important piece. I think it's sort of like playing goalkeeper in soccer, though. If you don't hear about it, it means that you're doing a pretty good job. And I think the reality is we've done a pretty good job in terms of security for networks in general. I think we've had 2 or 3, spectacular blow-ups, and the rest it's been, for the amount of network that's now in the public domain, we've done a very good job, I think, in terms of security. But I think it's going to be an area that we're going to keep focusing on. I think it's one of those things that, you don't get paid a lot for, but you get in a lot of trouble if it doesn't work. And so that's where I think every network operator has to think about this going forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's over the last 18 months, it's risen to definitely one of the top 3 concerns with cost and performance. And then it extends to the whole cybersecurity world that we're operating in now. Certainly people in this room are protecting a lot of companies from the terrible environments that we've read about over the last 12 months and the difficult situations. And I would guess, as I think about the future, that cybersecurity is going to become a top priority for every company on the planet, protecting their information, given what we've observed with these, handful of companies that have had very tough situations. And, you think about our world, particularly where you grew up, you think about the world of, we tried to make it easier for our users to get to all the applications in your company, so we built single sign-on. We made it really easy to get to your internal applications. Well, guess what? The world's changing now, and making it really easy for the bad guys to get into your networks is not a good thing anymore. And I think we're going to be thinking about how long do we want to store our emails, where do you park them? I think there's going to be a whole change in the next 12, 14, 18 months on how we run our companies, protecting the information that we're moving around the world for our customers in a much faster way than we expected a year ago.
Well, we have just a couple minutes left here. If there are any final thoughts you want to offer, but I also thought we might open it up to the audience to the extent that you've got questions for the panel this morning. Questions? I have a bunch more, so don't be shy. Yes?
Yeah, I have one. You just brought it up. The issue of movement of data. Data not leave their country. So what is going to, how can you ensure that when you have a distributed network and distributed data centers, that data that needs to stay in country A stays in country A and is not accessible or will somehow be backed up in another country?
I think it's one of the biggest challenges, because the segregation, I mean, the regulators are becoming very, very active in this space, especially in the banking sector, where they want data to stay resident in the country. So no, it's a big issue, and what constitutes data that has to stay, because there's emails, there's all sorts of traffic that goes on a network that may or may not pertain to that. So no, it's probably one of the bigger issues, and the governments are probably the most active. I've seen more in the last 12 months, not only on just storage of data, but even trying to tax different types of applications as well. So I mean, one of the biggest issues that we have as we get into the cloud space is that governments also want to tax, if the cloud computing is in India and you're actually paying for it in the United States, does the Indian tax man get a piece of this? So there's going to be a lot of governments, not only where things are resident, but also how the governments interact with us. And it's going to be, I think, a very different regulated environment over the next couple of years as they look at these things. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I would agree with what Bill's saying. I think it's a great question. I think it ranks right up there with the security conversation, the privacy conversation of information. And from our view, we've been playing and operating in this environment for many years, since we operate in 15 countries. And so you couldn't, first of all, we have to abide by the rules in that country and the laws in that country, and you can't operate there if you can't provide that kind of service to your customer. But it's a much higher discussion with our customers today. So if you're in Switzerland or Germany or Singapore or wherever you are, you can bet that the conversation with those local customers that are putting server infrastructure and storage arrays in a local data center, that they don't want people having access to that stuff from another country, or particularly if you're an American multinational service provider. So top of mind priority, something we have to first of all live by legally, and make sure that our customers understand that we're facilitating that. And so generally we benefit from that, because of having 100 data centers in 15 countries and 32 of the biggest cities. We can facilitate that for a local customer pretty easily.
Compliance tends to come with budget. And so people not only need to actually protect the data, but they need to comply with the rules. And we've seen a rise, at least in my business, of businesses that help people comply with the rising regulation here. I think that will be a big spend, and in fact, a big opportunity for people. We have time for one more. Yes.
So we all love the cloud, no question about that. But I'm just curious, the CEO perspective, particularly from an interconnection operator. The cloud, in a way, if you think about Porter 5 Forces type of analysis of the industry, consolidates buying power into a handful of a few over-the-top players, to the point that Bill brought up on the earlier slide about kind of the increasing value and consolidation. And that's kind of a threat if you're an interconnection operator, in the sense that, in the worst case, there's only one provider and you can be disintermediated. So even though we love the cloud, to what extent do you think that that's a negative factor? And then the second thing would be, Everyone seems to believe that all IT moves to the cloud, and I think I proved 6 or 7 years ago that hybrids were optimal, and that kind of to your point, Robert, around kind of where the spend is, a majority of it is still in private data centers, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. And that if you look at any other industry, the ownership model is often overweighted relative to the on-demand pay-per-use model. So curious about thoughts on kind of the ultimate end state. Is it one cloud provider, several cloud providers, or the end state is really a continuing hybrid that includes both private data centers that are interoperating with public ones?
Oh, it's a pretty detailed question.
So, do the OTT providers have a lot of market power, and will it all be cloud? I guess I heard.
Yeah, well, I'll give you a point of view based on the view we have. First of all, I do think the multi-cloud a hybrid cloud, whatever you want to call it, is going to be the next paradigm shift that we're going to be operating in. And I personally haven't been around this industry, not quite as long as this guy, but I was around during the mainframe. And I think this is just the next decade of paradigm shift. When I went from mainframe to mini, as Bill said, and we went to client server, and then we went to the desktop. Now the compute model is going to this thing called cloud computing. It's the next paradigm shift. So will all applications go to the cloud? Of course not. I'll give you an example. We have a Fortune 50 company, probably a Fortune 20 company, that has 9,000 applications that runs this company globally. And they're going to move 1,000 of those applications to the cloud this year. So I think it varies by customer, it varies by workload, and most companies have a 2 or 3 tiered workload in their application. And initially I think people were worried about, well, they'll move the back office applications first in test and development. And I can tell you, absolutely, we're seeing mission critical, performance, latency dependent applications moving to the cloud today. Cost reasons, security reasons, all the reasons that the previous 3 decades of compute changes happened. So it's going to happen. Will they be interconnected? Data point, in the last 18 months at our company, I told you we've gathered over 1,200 cloud-related service provider players, and probably over 10,000 cross-connects associated with customers trying to connect into those cloud providers. So in a matter of the last 6 to 12 months, we've accumulated that many interconnections trying to connect to those clouds privately, publicly, et cetera. So is it happening? I think so. We have sort of an interesting perspective in that we're in the middle of it and we're enabling a lot of it. So when you start seeing that trend, and for our little company that you guys know the size of it has 140,000 cross connects around the world enabling all this interconnection. And in the last 6 to 8 months, we've accumulated 10,000 interconnections going to these cloud providers. Tells you something's going on. And it's primarily driven what Bob said. It's driven by the big ones today, the big 3, and then follows closely by the next 10. But it's happening, and there's going to be a lot of winners with the small to medium businesses, and certainly the share takers now are very strong and dominant today. And people are going to use those services. And I think customers, just our little company uses 40 cloud service providers to run our IT in our company. So, generally a $2.5 billion US company around the world uses 40 cloud providers to run our IT. Now, we're probably a little bit forward-leaning in terms of that environment, but that's where the world's going to go.
Great. Well, thank you. I would a big round of applause for our panel this morning. Thank you for being here.
A very special mahalo to the 2014 PTC Board of Governors for their year-round leadership and support. PTC'15 is made possible in part by the generosity of the PTC'15 sponsors. Mahalo to each of the PTC Platinum sponsors. Thank you for all of your support. Please enjoy a panel discussion with Telstra's Hugh Bradlow and Level 3's Jack Waters.
All right, good morning, everybody. Now for the most important session, the people that actually run the cloud and the internet and the pipes. And we were just talking back, I used to be a civil engineer, and I kind of always think of everything in terms of almost water distribution systems, and try to keep it all really, really simple. But my pleasure to have two of the foremost engineers for building networks in the world. We have Jack Waters from Level 3 and Hugh Bradlow from Telstra in Australia. I've known Level 3 a very, very long time. We were talking before that you're the founder of the company. Jim Crow was one of really my mentors and someone I really looked up to in the industry. And he, I think, had kind of the right idea for where the world was going. We were just talking about he was kind of 10 years too soon. But I used to kind of call the whole concept network-centric computing 15 years ago. And now it's obviously cloud computing. But all those volume growth that we used to talk about are really, really kind of kicking in. But Jack, maybe you want to start out a little bit in your background and what you focus on at Level 3?
Sure. My background, I've been with Level 3 for 17 and a half years. So I joined when there were 10 people. Now we have about 14,000. So the company's gone through a little bit of growth in the last 17 years. I used to say we're a small startup from Omaha, Nebraska, but now not so much. We operate in 3 major regions: North America, Latin America, and Europe, and have a whole host of services. My particular area of focus has always been the technology platform, developing products and systems to support that, and focusing on our customers.
You?
So I'm from Telstra in Australia, as Tim said. I've been there 19 and a half years, Jack, and 10 years running the research labs, 9 years as CTO, and the last half a year as chief scientist, where I look at the long-term strategic opportunities facing the business and where I think the industry as a whole will go and how it will influence the broader society around us.
And how are you adopting the network, or are you at all for the cloud? And I think, or maybe you can go back and talk about your strategy on the network and has it changed in the last 15 years, and where do you see things going now from a network perspective?
It sounds so silly today to talk about the original premise, but the original premise, and we were talking about this right before, was that you could build a telecommunications company with its foundation at the IP layer. And today, I mean, it sounds silly, right? Everybody kind of gets it. We all say, well, yeah, sure, that's right. But back then, that was a relatively unique thought. We were talking about the fact that less than 20 years ago, we argued in conferences like this and in technical meetings and standards meetings whether you could ever carry a phone call over IP. Now, if you're in the US, you can watch 4K streaming of House of Cards over your broadband internet connection. So it almost seems funny that we even thought that would be a problem. So at the core of our belief was IP, Internet Protocol, and that over time, that the pipe into your business or into your home would become very generic, like an Ethernet connection, and I'd be able to layer on many different services. And those services could be, they will become applications at the edge. Cloud it's an interesting, we're network guys, so we think the cloud is the middle bit, the network actually. But all the technology that we've all developed over the last few decades has been the enabler of what today is we talk about as the cloud. So for us, we want to connect every cloud provider that exists on the planet. And if you're in the cloud business, it's a great business. My guess is that there will be an ebb and flow of who wins and who loses. We don't know, and certainly there's some early winners, but there have been some early losers too. So the cloud is incredibly important, but our focus is really connecting customers to the different cloud infrastructures around the world.
And what's your network strategy? Is it changing because of the cloud?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as Jack says, we tend to be communications providers, so we see the cloud very much in terms of the network, but we're a bit different in the sense that we're addressing end-to-end requirements for enterprise customers. So as customers become more dependent on it, the SLA from glass to metal, in other words, glass in front of you, the user to the metal in the data center, becomes much more critical. And so we're doing things like application assured networking to ensure that the network part is part of that SLA, and that's something that we think gives telco providers a differentiation in that environment. So our focus is very much on being able to deliver consistent, reliable services, particularly to enterprise customers, but more generally across the community.
In that regard, Jack and I were just talking about in the back, he started working for Vint Cerf, who many of you know is kind of an internet legend, father of the internet. I saw him give him a presentation, I've been at my company 18 years ago, and he was kind of arguing against voice really cannibalizing long distance at the time, but he was at MIT, at the MCI at the time. And he kind of, I remember his calculation was saying that the internet at the time could only handle 4% of the capacity of voice calls that were kind of needed, which is true, and he wasn't arguing against the longer term, but there was a huge debate at the time, and there still is somewhat of a debate about quality of service. Can just the public internet handle the quality of service for all these new cloud applications, or is latency so critical that we have to see a lot more traffic on private lines or on guaranteed SLAs? What's your thinking on that, Joe?
I think business will demand a differing level of quality of service. We see that. We sell VPNs, we sell EVPL services, and our customers want to have a different level of service depending on the application, if it's video or voice or maybe less important traffic. The way you ask the question is a really good way to ask it, because technically there isn't anything that stands in the way of the public internet being able to provide a high level of service in the long run. Maybe not today, maybe longer out. There are other issues though, and ones that I think will continue to make businesses and enterprises look hard at what traffic do I want on a public network and what traffic do I want on a private network. Security being probably the biggest and highest profile thing right now. The hardest job in an enterprise now is being a CIO that carries personal card information. And if you follow Target or Home Depot in the U.S. and Sony and all the other recent very high profile security issues, part of the reason why is because of the public internet, that I can, as a bad person, I can talk to anybody I want to because everyone is connected. And that's something that I think the public internet will have to address in the long term, is how do we get a much more secure piece of infrastructure that allows more and more of those business critical applications. If not, private networking will continue to serve those needs very well.
So is, just before we move, is private networking growing as a percentage of traffic, or is your revenue, or is it the public network growing as a percentage of revenue and traffic, do you think?
From a revenue perspective, I'd say that our biggest selling products are really around both. We see great growth in and there's more to that dynamic around IPVPN and Ethernet private line. We see incredible growth on the public internet still. And go look at the Cisco VNI. I think Cisco does a fabulous job characterizing where the traffic is headed, and the growth on our network is extremely robust.
I want to touch on that next, but you're just your thinking also on public internet versus more private internet.
So we're a mobile operator, and mobile is probably now becoming dominant for us in many ways, like in most countries in the world. So you're definitely in the mobile environment. I tend to believe that quality of service is an absolute necessity, particularly for enterprise customers, but I think even for consumers. The experience of trying to make VoIP calls on Wi-Fi versus doing something like the way T-Mobile do it, where you do an R99 call into the cloud, is very, very different. So I don't believe that bandwidth will solve all problems in the wireless environment. Going back to Jack's point about security, I think there's a very important issue here that a lot of enterprise customers are slowly learning, which is you're probably better off from a security perspective, putting your enterprise environment in the cloud than you are trying to protect your own periphery yourself. And the reason for that is companies like us and Level 3 and other telco providers, that security is core to our business. So we have 300 to 400 security professionals whose job it is on a daily basis to monitor and defeat the threats that are coming off the internet. It's impossible for the average enterprise to replicate that group of people. It's just way too expensive and way too difficult. Whereas we can serve enterprise customers at a marginal cost with the same group of people because security is proportional to the size of the threat vector, not to the size of the customer base you're protecting. So I think there's an inevitability about enterprises moving into the cloud for that security reason.
It's a really good point that as a provider, we have a very unique perspective. We get to see a broader range of issues and vectors and attack, C2 networks and all the things that really build up to vulnerabilities for the enterprise. And if you're a single enterprise, you only get to see your own traffic.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty simple comparison, and one that we believe, as well as any big provider, you need more and more data, more and more information, so that you can make more and more informed decisions around security.
So are you beefing up your own security capabilities, adding more employees, putting more money in R&D?
We don't have 300, but we have over 100 security folks in our company. We just literally built a significant footprint for DDoS, which we'll talk more about in the coming months. And for years we've had a large portion of the public internet as part of our service, and we've always had to have just the basic things like filtering at the edge of our network on behalf of our customers, filtering at our peering and interconnection points, and just to help with things like DDoS.
So can I just pick up one thing Jack just said, which is this visibility of all the traffic. The biggest thing now in security is anomaly detection. Knowing what are the unknown unknowns, to quote Donald Rumsfeld. So the fact that we're seeing all this data and we can start applying machine learning techniques to it is the only way in which you can actually do that anomaly detection. So I think that whole visibility of being a provider is going to be critical.
So do you think you can start getting a little bit better pricing premiums on your private networks, broadly speaking, combined with security, as a result of all the changes in complexity and threats?
I think that we'll have services that are very specific to security. I don't know if I'd say that there would be a pricing premium, but I think that there is a real need, and that companies are willing to pay for help with their security issues.
And maybe just stepping back a little bit, have you seen an acceleration in volume growth in your networks because of what's going on with the cloud and the economy, or everything going on, maybe on wireline, and maybe you can talk about what's going on with mobile in Australia?
Well, in terms of volume growth, absolutely, and no question about it. It's driven by video, and I saw some interesting statistics the other day, which just give you a snapshot illustration. Is Netflix is not launched in Australia, but between 250,000 and 500,000 Australians are actually subscribers of Netflix and are using DNS unblocking services to access it. And somewhere I read that it's between 4 and 6% of our network traffic. This is for an unlaunched service. So in the States, it's way up above the 30 to 40% mark already. I think I saw half the traffic or something is now. So yeah, absolutely. Now in the mobile network, that's no different. People are watching YouTube. They're much more watching on mobile devices. So we're seeing steady traffic growth. But fortunately, we've always had a rational pricing policy to actually recognize that capacity, data capacity, volume reflects in real costs. So we've managed to curtail it in the sense that it's not got runaway growth in that sense, but it's still extremely fast growth.
I can't say I'm a fan of that, but because I do watch 2 4K Netflix streams at the same time in my 50 megabit symmetrical house, but I'm very lucky.
You wouldn't do it on a mobile network, though.
No, not on a mobile. Oh, so yeah, mobile, yeah, I understand, but on the wireline,
Actually, on mobile, for small screen devices, which is what people are mainly watching on, the way in which we've capped our pricing is not an issue for most users.
And do you think you're also seeing accelerating volume growth as a result of all the changes?
I do, and I think it's more, the volumes are so big that it's hard I'd say it's hard for the cloud as a class of traffic and volumes. It'd be hard for the cloud to move the needle just yet, because I think it's still pretty early on. Absolutely 100% video is the driver of traffic today. And you know, you could construct an argument that we're just at the beginning, not even close to the end of penetration for video. I think the other thing that if you look at broadband connectivity and speeds per household, there's a bunch of things going on if you dig one level deeper. The number of broadband connections in the U.S. is relatively stable. It's not a huge amount of additional households being connected. But if you get out of the U.S. and look towards Asia, look towards other parts of the developing world, that growth is spectacular. So we're seeing huge growth from that. We're seeing huge growth from just connectivity speeds per household, and then number of connected devices is today, you know, it's more than the number of people on the planet. And if you look at different regions of the world, it's 1 for 1 in many parts of the world, and we know that it will get to more than 1 to 1 pretty soon. If you add on top things, the Internet of Things, the 2015-14 buzzword, I think there's a projection out there that says 2020, 50 billion connected devices and sensors, and I personally think that number's low.
I agree with you. Just going back to the traffic and cloud on the mobile network, one thing, and I forget where I saw the statistics, so I can't be quoted on it, but I did see that there's a shift in the downstream to upstream bandwidth from like 5 to 1 to 3 to 1. So a lot of that, I think, is things like Instagram, but we definitely are seeing that that trend will go. It won't be symmetric, but we're seeing that shift in the symmetry occur.
And you're seeing that in your mobile networks?
I can't remember where I got that, whether it was our network or more generally, but that statistic sticks in my mind, that shift of the ratio.
So are you guys doing anything from a network strategy perspective to handle this growth in terms of either equipment or peering points, or what do you think the big shifts in the underlying technology are?
Well, I mean, there's lots of technical detail, things like coherent detection and optical, 100 gig, 200 gig, 400 gig. I was just with some folks earlier, and they were telling me about a 300 gig project that was.
And
really
what's your network running at now, the wavelengths?
100 gig, 100 gig, and so those are all tools in our toolkit, and I mean, today, 20 years ago, when I was at MCI, I used to worry every month. I'd worry about, oh my gosh, what equipment are we gonna be able to buy, and how are we gonna put it together to accommodate the growth that we see? Today, I think we have more visibility into what growth and how we will accommodate growth than we ever have. So there's a lot of technology that will continue to help, and with that, you know, the economics improve and all that.
But it seems like 20 years ago, a lot more of the technology was very proprietary, and it seems like now it's a little bit more open standard. Could you maybe talk about how you try to source your equipment, and at a high level, what's going on with pricing trends on equipment?
Yeah, I think the technology world has done a fabulous job converging into a few different underlying protocol standards, Ethernet, IP, some of the encoding technology is all converging, and even in a mobile network, it's all IP underneath today. So that's been a great for us. We always believe that if technologies converge like that, then we will get the benefit of volumes in the underlying subsystems, in standards, and I think we all see that. So that's been our thesis for a long time, that that we want to choose technology that has great underlying volume creation. And so data center volumes are something we look really hard at. I don't personally think that 20 companies around the world can drive enough volume to really produce the scale. 10,000 companies can, and so that's why we see more and more data center type technology being used in much broader applications.
So at a high level, maybe you can comment, like, for example, Sprint was just telling me they cut their CapEx last year from $7 billion guidance down to $6 billion, and I asked the CFO why, and he said, we just got incredible pricing on equipment. And we're basically deploying the same amount of equipment out there. So I guess, at a high level, are you seeing more competitive equipment prices as we get more standardization and more elasticity, more volume growth?
There's no question we're seeing that, but don't forget a lot of our CapEx goes into our mobile network, and in a mobile network, the price of equipment is probably 20% of the overall CapEx cost. You pay much more for site costs and for infrastructure costs than you do for equipment, and there's no slowing down in the need for growth in the mobile capacity. So, the equipment costs are absolutely important. We are seeing them decline. I think the one area where the standards are in flux is in SDN. We're seeing a lot of sort of discussion, debate, contention around SDN, which is delaying a rapid movement towards standardization. But overall, yes, it's no question, as Jack says, the technology industry has done a fabulous job.
And while we're on SDN, sorry, and a few of those other acronyms there, are you a believer in SDN, or do you think it's just a normal evolution of what we've been doing anyway?
My view has changed a little bit in the last year, and the separate. If you go back to the sort of classic definition of SDN, separation of control and forwarding logic, and that's a really interesting idea that applies to a portion of our technology platform, but I wouldn't say a large portion. Where SDN has sort of evolved is that part, that original idea, but then a whole lot around control. So if you hear about netconf or Yang, those are languages or protocols that allow a common way to provision across a very heterogeneous environment. And that's what we all have. We have very heterogeneous environments. We've gone through acquisition over the last 15 years. And so we have many different equipment types. We have many different architectures that we've been converging over time. But that part of SDN is super interesting to us. The idea that being able to provide our OSS and all the control, a common interface across all of our infrastructure that's real money for us.
And you're starting to deploy that?
We are.
So yeah, absolutely. The OSS opportunity is the big one. I probably am slightly different from Jack in the sense that we are a data center provider as well, and clearly SDN has taken over the data center. But I also tend to believe, and again, because we're an end customer provider, I think that in the CPE environment, SDN is going to come in probably much quicker than people anticipate, because particularly in the consumer environment, we're constrained by residential gateways, CPU and memory capacity, and the ability to take a lot of the functionality out of the consumer's home and put it in your cloud will be very powerful as the consumer environment gets more and more complicated because of things like the Internet of Things. By the way, the buzzword of 2014 was big data, but I won't argue too much with you on that.
Do you think that'll be driven on open standards, or like in the United States, we have Comcast as their own proprietary system, Apple's trying to develop something. Who do you think wins in that process?
I think it's going to be extremely complicated, and there's an unknown in the sense of the consumer choice. I don't know whether consumers would prefer a unifying app that controls their own home, like I have at the moment, where I can turn on the lights, I can see the security systems, all that from one app, or whether they're going to just buy piecemeal. I want a Nest app, I want an August door lock app, I want, and that I think is an unknown in consumer behavior.
But there's two ways to view it, though. I think underneath, whether there's 1 or 20 apps, I think that the standards community will have to converge. And you think about just even radio control for the Internet of Things. there has to be a deeper set of standards that everyone implements, or
Although the irony with the Internet of Things is I could reel off half a dozen standards
I know.
right now. So,
well, unfortunately, I could talk to both of these gentlemen for all day and for hours, but we have time for a couple of questions from the audience here, if we have any. Oh, one over here, Mr. Wyman. One question, please.
Just a quick question going back to Internet of Things on network implications. So I was talking with Peter Coffey yesterday, and he pointed out that some of the existing standards and even architectural principles may or may not still apply as we think about the Internet of Things. So, for example, the notion that the time to die may be shorter because you really need to, if you're doing vehicle collision detection, for example, you don't really need a packet bouncing all around the world because it's too late, or context sensitivity around location. So, any more thoughts around emerging standards and architectures, and are we on the right track, or does there need to be a V7 or a V8 or something to support the 50 billion devices plus?
So look, it's kind of, Joe, that's an interesting point because there's a belief, I think, in the mobile community that 5G will be the one unifying interface to rule them all. I don't tend to believe it. We'd love to think that every one of those 50 billion devices will have a SIM card in it, but they won't. So my guess is about 1 in 100 devices will have a SIM card, and the other 99 will actually be working off a range of mobile standards. And our focus is on, can we incorporate the different types of mobile standards into a unified management environment that we can still deliver an SLA from and deliver coverage and capacity. So I don't think there will ever be a situation where there's going to be just one perfect standard. I think it's a case of bringing heterogeneous standards together.
The thing, when you said V8 or V7 or V8, I actually, very specifically, if that's a question around IPv6, I think it's absolutely the case that we as an industry have to move more ubiquitously towards V6. We have to, and to continue to support, 50 billion things, we're going to need that. But on top of that, I think there's a lot more standards work that has to happen before it's really realized.
We're out of time. Thanks so much. Great job, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Infinera's approach to the subsea space is to bring you the industry's best and most powerful innovations, help drive your ability to generate revenue and lower costs to create a competitive advantage, and to deliver to you a subsea network that's designed for optimum performance for your customers. Don't just take it from us, take it from our customers, from around the world that have trusted in us and continue to grow their network with the best subsea network upgrade in the business.
Are you plugged into social media? Then join the conversation online. Follow PT Council on Twitter and use the PTC hashtag #PTC'15. You can also like Pacific Telecommunications Council on Facebook. Toyota's Yuji Inoue explores the near-future vision of connected cars in this keynote presentation.
Hi, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is my great pleasure to be here, and this is my first time to attend the PTC. Although the name, I was known for a long years because I was an engineer as Sakamaki-san introduced me. But since the name of Hawaii, sometimes they hesitated us to attend here. But anyway, it's my great pleasure to be here again. And today, since I moved to the automobile ICT, information communication technology area 4 years ago, since then I have been working how to the car be connected. Not for the safetiness of the so-called ITS, intelligent transport systems, but how to use the car as a new infrastructure, as I would like to explain you now. Okay, you know, the 1 year has the 8,000 hours. How many hours you are using your car is like this. This is United States statistics. So in Japan, I guess that it's 500 hours or something like that. That means you are using only car as a moving vehicle about the 10% or less than 10% of the total year. Other hours, you put cars in the parking slot. And then if you turn off your car, it's just a damn iron box right now. But you see here, in the case of the Toyota Prius, it has more than 4 kilowatt-hour battery. So even if we turn off the car, batteries are quite enough in capacity. So how to use that one for various purposes? Okay, so I introduced the buzzword O 2.0. It's similar to the Web 2.0, as you are very familiar with that. And then this, I'm aiming to introduce a new infrastructure for the smart and resilient society. Okay, let me explain you how to use a car in disaster cases. So as an example of the resilience, you see here, this happened 4 years ago in Japan. As you know that the big earthquake hit the east part of Japan, and lots of tsunamis and huge damages happened. You see here, okay. Here the grounds are damaged like this, but at the time, also the car was running in that damaged field. And what happened at that age, due to that experience, that I'm now proposing to use the vehicle as information hubs, together with the temporary shelter and the electric power sources. How to do it, and why do we need this kind of things? This is when the cities are attacked, many people died, over 5,000 people died, but still most of them alive. And their houses are broken, so they had to go into the evacuation sites or refugees. In Sendai City, it had more than 300 refugee places or the evacuation sites. And since that happened during the daytime, suppose that the wife who is working as a part-timer in a supermarket, etc., and his husband is working in another place, and the children were going into the school. So families are split and had to be in the different evacuation sites. How to find their family members? It was very, very hard things because all of the telecommunications infrastructures were gone, destroyed within about a week. So how they did it? Like this, paper patch, or writing the messages on blackboard or whiteboard. And in the case of the paper patch, who distributed these papers to different the evacuation sites? Car with a gasoline, the hand patched. by seeing these figures, I thought, if the car distribute the paper, instead of distribute the paper, but instead distributing the message electrically. So then, car has this is the current car's phenomenon, the capability. But if we could equip Wi-Fi in the car, Wi-Fi is everywhere except car. Why? And in addition to that, there's a cognitive radio or white space, which has more capacity and capability for the distance. And plus the UHF ITS. ITS stands for the Intelligent Transport Systems. Mainly that is designed for the vehicle-to-vehicle communications and vehicle-to-traffic signals communications for giving more safety to the car. And also the car can be used as I mentioned, it's a shelter. Here you see, this is not the door, but this is real dog as a pet. In the evacuation site, the people cannot bring their cats or dogs in that area because some people don't like that. So cars are used as a shelter of the pets. So also this is the different importance of the car. Okay, so at the occasion of the ITS 2013, 1.5 years ago, we had the ITS World Congress in Tokyo site. So then I demonstrated as a real scenario for how to use the cars in this situation. So as you see here, all of the mobile base stations are gone. But if you could have the car Wi-Fi, people can connect to the car through the mobile phone. Right now, more than half people are carrying the smartphone. The smartphone has the messaging capabilities through the Wi-Fi. Messaging not only the letter, but also by voice. And cars are moving around, so this message can be transferred by cars and then to one evacuation site. And if in one evacuation site, some car, like a local city car, has the capability of the cognitive radio or white Wi-Fi, white space bands, then by using this capability, this site can be connected to other sites. And among the 300, if one car or one evacuation site has the electrical power and be connected to the satellite, for example, as the internet capability, then these areas, all of the necessary informations are uploaded to the internet or downloaded from the internet. So within 1 week, when all of the communications tools are gone, car will use as only one or the most important communication tool in this damaged area. That is very important to make the families finding, etc., etc. Okay, and one thing I illustrated in there that ITS, what ITS will be used in these disaster cases. This is the current situation when the big disaster happens and lots of buildings and houses are broken. We have to find out the people, victims, under the broken buildings. Right now, only the way is, as you see here, dog. To use a dog's nose. The dog nose sensitivity is more than 10 times than the people. So this is the only way. And if we have to find out the bodies buried under the ground, the disaster cases. So only thing we are now using is the rod. You see somewhere here, finding out the people, because we can take out this kind of garbages by machine, because the body might be buried there. So this takes a lot of time. But in the case of the victims under the buildings, usually we have to rescue them within 2 days. Otherwise, even if they are arriving alive, their life might be lost. So what we are now considering is that to prepare the wearable vehicle to H stands for the human. So this is a wearable chip. We are now designing this mainly for protecting people or pedestrian by the attack of the car. But why not extend its capability to these situations? So we are now developing this size of the chip or the equipment, which can be installed anywhere inside of the shoes or inside of your belt or whatever you like. So then if the people wears these things, and we are now designing it, it's the radio radiation capability about 1 month. So then, of course, we can use a dog, but in addition to the dog, we can find by the handy probe or by cars or even by helicopter. Our simulations gives us that about 300 meters over the air, we'll be able to get the radiation from this very small chip. Okay? So as TTC is a Japanese standard organization. TTC last August proposed this idea to the ASTAP. ASTAP is Asian standards. And not only the technology, but also how to use the disaster machines into the society, because how to use it and using it with the standardization is very important, because the Japanese people or Japanese guy may visit there to Philippines, for example, and then help them. So if the machines are different and the usage of the machines is different, it's very, very difficult to split this kind of technology for the real usage. So together with the technologies and the usage, we propose the standardization of these technologies. One is Wi-Fi, how to use the Wi-Fi, and UHF-1, the intelligent transport systems, and white space, or in other words, the cognitive radio. And we started this, and within 3 years, we are hoping that this could be standardized. Okay, so another topic is that how to use a car in the mining. You see here, this is one example of the Chilean, the biggest mining area. And in a normal road or tunnel, you see the car, about 2 ton to 4 ton plus the trucks, both way capability. And then the total length of this tunnel right now, over 100 years, it gets over 6,000 kilometers, not 6,000 meters. So, but since they have been, the miner have to maintain this over 6,000 kilometers tunnel, how to do it? They are doing it, of course, but you can imagine how difficult to keep the 6,000 length network. Since you are the telecom the background. So I'm now proposing. Now Chile started to dig the 4 to 5 new mining. So I'm proposing them that to equip the car hub, which can connect these kind of the sensors. In other words, it's IoT, Internet of Things, or Internet of Everything, or machine to machine. And this server could make the neighboring area network plus information processing as the first order of the processing. And these networks, since this is a neighboring area, so many cars are running in this area. So where? There are many these neighboring areas networks. They're composed by the car, and finally, this will be connected to the backbone optical networks with the capability. So then, this will ease the maintenance and also gives much more power in the processing. And this is the wearable, the worker's clothes. This was, by the way, I'm the visiting professor of the University of Chile, and my member, they created this idea and made a demonstration unit, and then proposed to the Intel's global challenge. And we got worldwide #1, the prize from the Intel. So this is a worker's jacket, including the sensors of like heartbeat. So then workers have some the injury situation or in sick. This could be reported to the car automatically and processed in the car hub, and then reported immediately to the center controlling stations. By the way, in the mining area, always over the 2,000 workers are working there. So you can imagine that how the importance will be this kind of the jacket. Okay, now the time is going on, so I'd like to skip some few slides more. And this is the total architecture of the smart and resilient society with the car, like this. So as I mentioned here, that integrated by the ICT, partially the volunteering by the vehicle. So I am not, let's say, competing with the telecommunication at all. Car will provide such kind of the very small area of network with the processing power, and how to do it together with the telecommunication capability. That's our challenge, and I'm looking forward to cooperate with the telecom guys in this area. Thank you very much.
PTC'15 is made possible in part by the generosity of the PTC'15 sponsors. Mahalo to each of the PTC Gold sponsors. Thank you all for your support. During PTC'15, the PTC Secretariat will be located in C Pearl 3 on the 6th floor of the Mid-Pacific Conference Center at the Hilton Hawaiian Village Waikiki Beach Resort. If you need assistance from a member of the Secretariat, please visit C Pearl 3. Your PTC'15 registration includes wireless internet access at the following locations throughout the Hilton Hawaiian Village Waikiki Beach Resort: Mid-Pacific Conference Center, Kalia Conference Center, Tapa Conference Center, the Super Pool, Tapa Pool and Bar, Starbucks. PTC'15 is made possible in part by the generosity of the PTC'15 sponsors. Mahalo to each of the PTC Silver sponsors. Thank you for all of your support. A panel of top experts will address opportunities, threats, and strategies for the cloud in this discussion.
So we have a great panel right now to talk about cloud, big data, the Internet of Things, and kind of all that jazz, and also ask if our heads are in the clouds. But we have kind of the three main facets of this emerging market present here. On the one hand, we have sort of the enabling technology vendor who's selling all the equipment that makes this stuff happen, as well as services. We have the integrated cloud and network service provider, and we have the over-the-top player. So maybe let me just let you each go along and introduce yourselves and also what your company does on the off chance that nobody's ever heard of you, but specifically also what you're doing now as far as your cloud strategy and also things around the related constellation of technologies.
Okay. Hi, I'm Peter Coffey. I'm VP for Strategic Research at Salesforce. I've been there for 8 years, during which time we've moved from being a pretty narrowly defined CRM, software as a service provider, into a much broader suite of what we now call customer success platform offerings, including service, marketing, analytics, and an application development platform in its own right. So even though we still use the Puffy Cloud logo, we're very much more about the tools to make use of the cloud from the point of view of customer behavior, as well as from the point of view of IT modernization and cost reduction. That's really what we do today, and it kind of defies categorization.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Jonathan King with CenturyLink, and I noticed from the monitor my head is shining very nicely out there, so hopefully I'm not blinding you guys. I am a Vice President of Cloud Strategy and Business Development with CenturyLink, and I'm responsible for our M&A strategy and our partnerships in our product organization. If you're not familiar with CenturyLink, we are a integrated telecommunications and IT services company. We have a global network that we offer. We serve both consumer and businesses with that network. We also are a very large co-location provider with 58 data centers globally, and a cloud and managed services provider.
Hi, I'm Manjula Thalreja, and I'm from Cisco. And my role at Cisco is I'm in the services organization. I'm the vice president in the consulting services group, running both the service provider business and the cloud business. If all of you do not know what Cisco and who Cisco is, started off as a networking router switcher company, very prominent in the cloud space, and as you may have noticed, done a lot of acquisitions and a lot of announcements related to cloud. And our point of view is that it is the world of intercloud where a lot of cloud providers will play an important role in the federation of clouds as especially enterprises drive hybrid cloud strategies.
So not the cafeteria services provider, Cisco, evidently.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. We were going to
That's
invite
right,
them to
not
this
the
panel.
food company.
That's right. Okay, so maybe the first thing is you all talk to a lot of customers on a consulting basis, on a strategic planning and partnership basis, et cetera. So the first obvious question is kind of what are the trends and or surprises that you're seeing as you talk to customers? I went that way, maybe we'll come back this way. So Manjula.
Yes, I think the speakers this morning talked a lot about the market changing fast, and it is. When 3 years ago we talked to a lot of the service providers on cloud, there was a lot of questions on infrastructure as a service, the infrastructure play. The conversation has changed. The conversation has changed from what are the value-added services and applications that I can provide, especially with the over-the-top players, where if I dare say the battle's been lost in some ways. So it's not an infrastructure play The second is a lot of conversation on Internet of Everything or Internet of Things and data monetization. As service providers who are in the cloud space are driving cloud services, how do they monetize the data that's going through their cloud services? Whether it is in order to drive their own better services in fulfillment and assurance and reducing truck rolls, or it may be related to value-added services that they can provide in terms of energy management to public sector and smart cities. So really large gamut rather than the original conversation that was predominantly focused on infrastructure as a service.
Yeah, I think building on that, what we see across almost all business customers is a common theme of change, and I don't think that's any surprise. But I think what beyond technology, companies are looking at agility from an organizational standpoint as well. So if you think about it from a technology standpoint, we really view our mission as enabling business agility, and agility can mean different things to different constituencies inside of a business. So for a developer, agility means I need what I want instantly. For an infrastructure provider, agility might mean I want to get access to a data center in another country where I don't have to build that data center, all the way up. And I think that's sort of our view of it from a technology standpoint. Absolutely, we've recently invested in a data services acquisition, so we see analytics and those things happening as well. But I think a thing which is maybe less appreciated is the organizational and systemic change. I mean, we have a generational change going on, but the pace of change itself is causing the historic hierarchical structures that we have all run our world economy around to really need to work in new ways and develop what John Kotter has described in his book Accelerate, a dual operating system, where we start to think about agile systems, networks, interclouds, multi-clouds, and that trend itself is only going to continue. And I think as a first-time attendee at PTC, one of the things I think is interesting about this venue and this industry is that it's always operated in this co-opetition model, which in some ways we're sort of, there's a perception that telcos move slowly and there's that side of it, but there's another side of it that there's a level of business sophistication and collaboration in this industry that also I think is one that can carry it forward.
Joe, over the course of 8 years, the conversations I've had with the C-suite have changed in many ways. 8 years ago, it was a question of capacity. At that time, Cisco was our only 5-figure deployment with 50,000 seats. They were a marquee customer for us in that respect. And the enterprise simply assumed that cloud was for companies that couldn't afford, quote, real IT, unquote. At that time, a 100 million transaction day was noteworthy for us, and now 1 and 2 billion transaction days on any given weekday are the norm. So capacity, no longer the question. Then it became customizability. And you would hear, well, cloud, that's fine for vanilla functions like a CRM or a service console, but I was told repeatedly, you won't see real ERP with its customizability and mission criticality requirements. Not only do you see it, but there are at least 3 companies that are pure cloud enterprise ERP offerings. So capacity, check. Customizability, check. Now it's compliance. You'll still see sweeping generalizations saying, well, you won't see cloud used in pick an industry that's highly compliance sensitive. And yet, as you heard Hugh this morning from Telstra remind people, the threat vector is what creates the cost, not the size of the protected population. And it's clear that the dynamism and intensity of the threat environment and some of the really in-depth work that's been done on things like the Stuxnet episode have reminded us of the sophistication of the attack environment and how quickly it evolves, and really the economics of security, compliance, governance, and auditability in the cloud are arguably the only way. So you use the phrase cloudonomics in the title of a book. Economics is always about what is scarce. Computing was once scarce, you had to go to the computer. And then Intel and ARM and AMD and others made computing abundant, but networking was still scarce, and you had to take your laptop and find a place where you could plug into a network. Well, now connectivity is abundant. What's the new scarcity? Money is made when you are able to deliver what is now scarce. What's now scarce today is trust, and the ability to deliver trusted confidentiality, integrity, high reliability, and integrity of service. That's where the differentiation opportunity is now, and that's the new cloudonomics, is creating data objects that don't come into the world naked, defenseless, and completely ignorant of their threat environment, but are born trustworthy, born secure. That's where the opportunity is to add value today.
So I was going to actually go in another direction, but that's a good point. So let me maybe ask a follow-up on that and go back this way, which is, ultimately everyone's concerned about monetization. And as we've seen for many of the over-the-top providers, the monetization opportunities often arise from exhaust data. So I have some transactions with a customer. I'm an e-commerce provider, and I'm just kind of selling goods. But then from that, I have exhaust data that tells me I know what consumer preferences are based on demographics and 5-digit zip, so I can then better target advertising by selling that demographic data to someone.
Yes.
So to what extent does that dichotomy between kind of the need to maintain trusted customer relationships versus the need to, maximize payoff to shareholders and not be accused of financial malfeasance,
yes,
kind of end up with a balance that is it insoluble, or is there a way to do it?
It's not far from being insoluble. It's the key to brand success today, because merely selling goods is begging to be commoditized. If you aren't wrapping those goods in differentiating services that people actually pay you on an opt-in basis to enjoy the concierge service, it's extraordinary. It's a very Tom Sawyer painting the fence thing. When you harvest data from people without their permission, they will march against you with torches and pitchforks. When you collect data and play it back to them in the form of value-adding services that they may even be paying a premium price to receive, they thank you for the opportunity to give you the data so that you can bring it back to them in the form of value, and which may not just be you. You may quickly become the hub of an ecosystem of those value-adding services. And what I warn people who think the cloud is about cost reduction is that if you become better, faster, and cheaper at doing what was useful to do 20 years ago, congratulations. You'll be an attractive acquisition target for someone who wants to make you a spoke in the supply chain of their service-differentiated brand. So the data, absolutely. If you're not capturing that data and using it to add significant value to what otherwise, what you used to think was your product, then you are just dying to get yourself into a price war with, Alibaba and Walmart, and the world only really needs one of each.
I have an additional point of view, which is looking at data monetization, cloud in a slightly different way. If you think about an oil company which has rigs all over the world, or whether you look at large retail companies that have stores all over the world, as a cloud provider, again, this discussion happened this morning. Large data centers, everything centralized, is not the way a market is moving right now. It's about being on the edge.
Yes.
So large amounts of data, trillion terabytes or whatever that's called of data sitting in oil rigs on a daily basis. You can do value-added services, especially for cloud providers and service providers who are masters at data at the edge, and we call that fog computing,
yes,
if I were to introduce a new word. And it's about leaving data at the edge. A customer, an enterprise customer, will pay more if you provided data in a distributed way through fog computing rather than the centralized way of cloud computing. So it's not only about monetizing the data you're collecting, but it is about monetizing the delivery model of data and cloud coming together through fog computing.
So let me come back to you on that in a second if I can, but I didn't know if you wanted to jump in and maybe, given your legal background, also talk about kind of regulatory issues, beyond privacy around data sovereignty and so forth.
You're reading my mind. So no, I thought Peter's comments on trust and then building upon on data, I've said sometimes that privacy is the new security. That we look at these security breaches, and oftentimes there's some kind of information revealed. There's a breach of privacy or confidentiality, and not the type of privacy like what I'm doing in secret over here, but just as a society, as an economy, as individuals, there's an inherent, almost like clean air, clean water that we take for granted of privacy and confidentiality that makes everything work and run. And over the past couple years, I started a degree I already have a JD, but I was starting this other legal degree, and 10 years ago it was open source, and then I got busy and put it on the shelf. And it was like Rip Van Winkle, because I came back and said, well, open source is done. It's a settled matter. And I looked at privacy, and I started to get involved in this privacy community out there and data protection if you're from the EU. And if you look at the regulation that's coming and the interest in this field, it really is what Peter's talking about in terms of trust, that brands that are trusted, people will share information with. But it's really a double-edged sword, that brands, and Target, Home Depot, when that information is revealed, right, in an unexpected way, then trust is eroded. And I think you now see mounting reaction from regulators really around the world who are starting to talk in terms of data sovereignty, data protection, and that is definitely a trend that's going to continue. And we've seen in our own survey results that now it used to be lower cost, agility, security, and now all of a sudden privacy has come as a top of mind item for companies to think about, that they absolutely want to take advantage of this data, but they need to do so in a responsible way so that unintended consequences are avoided.
I think the comparison to clean air and clean water is particularly apt because those are social standards. Individuals will not necessarily choose to pay more for clean air and clean water, and if you left that to a free market of individual buyers and sellers, you probably would not have everybody better off as a result. And it's interesting that you can't buy an electrical appliance in many markets without an underwriter's laboratory sticker on it that guarantees certain minimum standards of safety and integrity at the volts and amperes level. Yep. I don't think we have anything yet that plays that role of setting a minimum floor for data integrity, privacy maintenance, privilege management, and auditability of interaction that would do analogously in the digital realm what the UL sticker does for you in the classical electricity realm. And I think that's something that's really a deficiency in the way we're approaching what's arguably now becoming the more valuable market, which is the market of bits, not atoms.
For someone to pursue. So to go back to, Manjula, what you were talking about earlier as far as fog computing and sort of the general distributed computing problem and or opportunity, we've got a lot of service providers here in the audience. So I'll start with you first, because obviously this is your base, and to the extent, Jonathan, that you're willing to share best practices and insights for people who may be your competitors, and Peter, for you in the case of certainly the mobile operators, a lot of them are partnered with you. But I guess the question may be, or single thought that some of the people in the audience might walk away with is, what would you recommend that they do to take advantage of the emerging opportunities of cloud, big data, Internet of Things? And also, maybe by way of explaining that, if there's a great case study example of something that you're doing with a partner, doing with a customer, that's sort of the sterling role model example, if you could share that, I think that would help illustrate the point.
So let's start with the use case, because to your point, that animates it at the most. So let's take two use cases. There's a major in the United States and another use case in Asia, since this is PTC for the Pacific. In the United States, major retailer around the world, or at least in the United States, that's where they're starting. They are putting video cameras, sensors in their carts to really drive a lot of optimization of number of people that need to be in the cash register. Because the old days, I know when I go for a carton of milk into Safeway in the United States, and I go at 2 in the afternoon, there are not any cash registers because they're expecting people to come in at 5 in the evening after work. And none of us are working 8 to 5. So how do you drive a grocery store now or a retail store with data sitting real time at the edge with cloud services that are coming in through cloud providers? So important to understand the vertical that you're going to go into. And I would say it's not about as many horizontal services that you provide, but being very careful about which is the vertical you want to go after. Do you want to go after retail? Do you want to go after public sector or SMB? SMB in the United States, as an example, next 6 years. Today, 36% of SMBs are using cloud services. Within 6 years, 80% will. A completely different go-to-market, different kind of services, whether it's a vertical market in the enterprise or it is SMB.
So if I could translate that into sort of a direct, actionable recommendation where someone can walk out of here with something on their to-do list, is it to develop a vertical market competence or build a team or work with a partner? Or
I think it's both. It is how do you go to market in a particular market? I think having watched the service providers over the last 4 years, heavy investments have gone into building the infrastructure, providing the services. The Achilles heel has been the sales transformation and moving to consultative selling versus selling of just based on rate cards, telecom and voice. So same concept. Taking it a further higher.
Sorry to stick with you on this, but I think this is really like a critical point, right? Because I did strategy for a large service provider for a long time, and the question you always wrestle with is you've got this core infrastructure business, and you'd like to move above it and be more than just a dumb pipe and help add value and create competence, but then you're kind of moving into the area of, I don't know, the formerly IBSG, now Cisco Consulting, or Accenture, Avanade, et cetera. So can telcos actually do that? Can they move into that degree of competency successfully?
Either the telcos do it and transform themselves to really compete, or they partner. So telcos go to market has to dramatically change in terms of how they go into the market, especially if you go into the enterprise space and you go into the business. We have mentioned earlier, the role of CIOs is significantly changing. Does the telco want to go just work with the CIO or the overall business, since the businesses are making major decisions on cloud services? These are key questions to be asked, but which market you're going into is the first piece of the strategy.
Makes sense.
And where you're going to go.
So Jonathan, by the way, if anyone has any questions, I'm going to open it up in 2 minutes, so get ready to ask and maybe hold your hand so you're ready with a mic. So.
Yeah, I think one thing, it's hard for such a diverse group to give maybe something that cuts across all of it, but one thing to think about is what is your own internal operation doing and consuming? And if you're going to offer something to third-party customers, are you yourself using that? And that's one thing that we've used as a yardstick as we've come together on, we've done different acquisitions, but CenturyLink IT is using CenturyLink Cloud and has engaged teams and expanding training groups that are increasingly looking at how we're moving more and more to CenturyLink Cloud. And I think that's one yardstick that you can use, because if you yourself cannot buy what you are selling, then I think you have to stop and say, well, what is really core? I think the second thing is to look at how do you develop products? And are you working in a way where you're getting your results are moving to market in a very agile and rapid way? Have you moved from a waterfall approach to more of an agile approach? Because table stakes for anything up the stack, whether you're building it yourself or whether you're partnering, are really looking very carefully at how you're developing products.
Peter, advice to service providers.
Joe, we absolutely believe that speaking the language of the customer in a vertical domain is critical, is a differentiator, it establishes credibility. And network providers already have achieved the critical first step of having a business relationship and being a trusted provider of a mission critical service. And so adding that sense of, and I'm here to talk about what you do, not to talk about what I want to sell you, is not a big leap, but it's a surprisingly non-obvious leap for a lot of companies. It seems that they want to come in and pitch their SKUs, when what they really should be doing is spending 1 hour, 50 minutes listening to the customer talk about their problem, 6 minutes reflecting back what they've heard, and then 4 minutes saying, okay, here's what we've got that's going to do that for you. It changes the relationship completely.
Quick aside on that. First of all, are there any questions?
Oh, there's one vertical industry example I wanted to add. Oil and gas looks to the person outside that industry as if it's dominated by the majors. Really, the majors are only a small double-digit percentage of the business. Most of that business is this enormous long tail of local specialty operators. And if you look at the history of an oil well, it starts life as a seismic blip, and ends life as an environmental reclamation problem. And in the middle, I had one customer say 15 different units of their business that has grown by acquisition of 240 companies over the last 40 years. 15 different business units might touch that place, might touch that hole in the ground, with no mutual knowledge of what the other ones are doing. Now, the opportunity for a network provider to become a creative medium in which those 15 units really do start to collaborate. Stop thinking of the temporary owner of the well as your customer, because really the well is a stable object. Its ownership might change. That hole in the ground is, in a meaningful sense, your customer.
Right.
And that's very much a network value add opportunity. Someone earlier in the panel today said ultimately people want to run applications. I actually had to restrain myself from jumping up and saying wrong, because running applications is the naval gun of shooting at a stationary target that you have lots and lots of time to aim at. Today, it's not about running apps, it's about orchestrating a dynamically evolving set of APIs to find value in data and to play that back in the form of services.
Every day in a
Rapidly
turbulent
shifting.
world. So
Rapidly shifting.
We're actually out of time, so I apologize if anyone did have a question, but there's an Executive Insight Roundtable that's going to follow up more on these topics, and that's a much more interactive setting. So if you do have questions or want to continue the dialogue, we will see you at, I think, 1 p.m. For the first EIR on this. So with that, thank you very much. Great job, panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you. PTC'15 is made possible in part by the generosity of the PTC'15 sponsors. Mahalo to each of the PTC Bronze sponsors. Thank you for your support.
Aloha again. I hope you have enjoyed your time in Honolulu at PTC'15. Remember, PTC's mission extends well beyond our annual conferences. Learn more about our year-round activities and join us at ptc.org. Once again, mahalo for joining us this year. I look forward to seeing you at PTC'16 from January 17th to the 20th. Ahui ho!
PTC TV is brought to you by PTC'15 Platinum sponsor Equinix. Mahalo Equinix, thank you for sponsoring PTC TV.